Prologue to Gems of the Northwest, a brief description of prominent places of interest along the lines of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway and connecting roads. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ted Lienhart. Gems of the Northwest by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company. Prologue. The respectable gentleman who subscribed to an important document in American history known as the Declaration of Independence, meaning the one which has been read on every 4th of July since the time when the American people emerged from the woods, and the rest of mankind realized that there was no bunkum in the concluding pledge of that instrument, wherever there has been a celebration of that day with reference to the event associated therewith in the minds of American citizens. Well, as we started to say, John Hancock and his compatriots had no more idea what a century of development would make of the colonies, their pronunciamento set free from colonial bondage, than the first scribbler about the beauties of the Golden Northwest had about the extent and variety thereof, either in their then natural state or as they would prove under the hand of industrious and tasty culture. In this production, entitled The Gems of the Northwest, on the odd-numbered pages from 7 to 71, both inclusive, are truths as self-evident. To him who, in the love of nature, holds communion with her visible forms, as the truths set forth in the Magna Charta of American liberty, with the advantage of being rejuvenated, fresh and fragrant with the advent of every spring, and are thus validated by the evidence of the whole range of human senses, which, to the average of mankind, are confirmations strong as proofs of Holy Writ, and perhaps stronger to many. The matter recorded on such pages, though having done service in its vocation for several years, has lost none of its vitality, and is commended to the attention of all to whom the beauties of nature and art, and a testimonial to the capacities of intelligent culture, are of interest. Verbum sat sapientibus. End of prologue. Section 1 of Gems of the Northwest, a brief description of prominent places of interest along the lines of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway and connecting roads. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ted Lienhart. Gems of the Northwest by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company. The Lake region of Wisconsin. Not far from Milwaukee and Wisconsin, and along the line of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway, there is a cluster of lovely lakes, on the borders of which nestle a number of abiding places, peculiarly inviting to those who seek desirable homes during the summer solstice. A few brief lines regarding each of these delightful spots may not be inappropriate, and I therefore commence with Pewaukee as being the first point of interest westward from Milwaukee. Pewaukee is not a specially attractive place as seen from the window of a railway car. It lies upon the shore of Lake Pewaukee, which presents here its least picturesque aspect. Ye who seek rest, sport, or any other form of summer recreation, be not discouraged, however, from alighting at Pewaukee. About the green rushes dart black bass and pickerel, only waiting the hook of a patient angler. The Oakton Springs and other hotels afford excellent accommodation. The boats are numerous, likewise the boatmen to row you, and when the fish will not bite, there are good liverymen waiting to furnish the gentle family horse or the swift roadster, and cool, charming, and sweet are the drives within reach of Pewaukee, notably that which circles the lake. Within easy driving distance, too, are lakeside cottages and Waukesha, from whence come many amateur fishermen to try their luck in Pewaukee Lake. But if you pass Pewaukee, stop by all means at the next station, Lakeside, endeared and familiar to so many that it is hardly necessary to extol its virtues. Buses wait here for every train and bear you over a brown and winding road about 1 mile to the cluster of cottages upon the banks of Lake Milwaukee. A good-sized hotel, accommodating 250 guests and surrounded by inviting cottages, constitutes Lakeside. Green grass abounds, green trees girdle it, and to the jaded inhabitants of cities it looks, in the contrasting whiteness of its pretty buildings, as fair as Circe's palace to the weary comrades of Ulysses. But there are no perils here for travelers. The table satisfies the most critical, while hair mattresses and spring beds rest their tired limbs. Ample parlors and reception rooms afford space for the card table, the dance, or the quiet chat. Without, a restful and lovely view refreshes the eye at every turn. The surrounding woods invite ramblers, and the nearer trees, the more indolent hammock swinger. There is seclusion at the cottages for those who desire it, and gaiety for the gay. Bowling, billiards, lawn tennis, and croquet, with a good livery stable, numerous boats, including a small steamer from Milwaukee, and good music for the light-footed in the evening, while a telegraph office and a telephone remind one that the world can be reached if desired. One would fain linger here, but other delights are to be found beyond as well. Suffering the railroad to lead us, the little village of Heartland is next in order. It is not a wonderful place to look at, certainly, but it is the portal by which we are conducted to untold pleasures beyond. Tired businessman and more tired wife and mother pause here. The quiet and lovely places that you can afford to pay for are near. Pine Lake, Beaver Lake, North Lake, and farther off, Lake Kesis, famed for fish, invite you. Dotting the banks are boarding houses too numerous to mention, all quiet nooks to rest in, where the children can run about safely, and mother may be emancipated from the elaborate toilet of the watering place, for cambrics reign supreme for old and young. After Heartland, with its surrounding attractions, comes Nashotah. Nothing here, apparently, but be not deceived. This is a journey of delightful surprises. Pleasant and quiet retreats lurk on every side of this dull-looking station, within easy driving distance of it, and the flourishing Episcopal mission of the same name is but 2 miles away. The neighboring lakes, so justly celebrated for their sylvan beauty, are well filled with fish, and aside from this powerful recommendation, the sight of them alone repays the traveler for his pains in visiting them. The twin Nashotah lakes, the two Nemahbins and Nagawika, connected by little streams with each other, wind like a silver chain through the green woods and pleasant fields, opening new vistas of lake and woodland at every turn, to the pleased eye of the stranger as he drives along. Nagawika cottages and many other places can be found hereabouts, offering good summer homes or shelter for a few days, as may be desired. After Nashotah, we pause for a moment at Okoboji Station, whence we may speedily reach the lake of that name and its quiet houses of resort, where the real country lover may well content himself. Next, the dainty station of Giffords appears. Giffords looks promising at the first glance from the car window. There is nothing in sight but the station, yet that has a festive air about it, and when, after 5 minutes' walk, you reach the white hotel half hidden in green trees, the driveway and lawn alone separating it from the limpid waters of Oconomowoc Lake, that, stretching out in silver loveliness before it, calls forth an involuntary cry of delight. Then do you feel sure that, however fair the promise, the reality is fairer. Here we may indeed be happy. If in search of the really picturesque, no better place than this can be found. To enter, of a hot morning, one of these small boats at the pier and lazily row up the wild stream nearby, where the green trees, arching over, dip their fingers into the water, the clear, rippling water that tempts us to do likewise, is delicious. Or, more delicious, is to moor our tiny craft to the trunk of a tree and, lying in this woodland paradise, drink in the rest and beauty that are here. But for the restless, those who have forgotten how to possess their souls in peace, or who, by nature, never knew how, There is other occupation at Giffords than fitting oneself for a membership in the Summer School of Philosophy. There is a fine bowling alley, a dancing hall, billiard table, and croquet, while the drives from this central location are countless and beautiful, and the roads good. Oconomowoc, Nashotah, Waukesha, Lakeside, all of the other summer resorts, in fact, are within reach of the sojourner at Giffords, or if one would bide at home, the rooms and the table are good, and comfort reigns. There is an old children's saying that the last is the best of all the game, and it may be true, for the pretty village of Oconomowoc smiles brilliantly upon us. Here many fashionable parties come to fill the summer hours with pleasure, and for once fashion chooses wisely. The village lies between La Belle and Fowler Lakes, a charming situation, and an air of perpetual holiday pervades it in summer. One cannot but wonder if it is ever winter in Oconomowoc. The numerous and elegant summer residences remind one of the older East, and the yachts that dot the lakes lend a nautical touch to the scene. During the last year, the various lakes in this vicinity have been connected by a system of locks, and fully 30 miles of lake surface can now be traversed by sail and rowboats and steam yachts. The thronged hotels are excellent. First in size and elegance is the famous Townsend House, D.G. Rogers, Esquire, proprietor, while others follow close upon it. Draper Hall, with its grounds touching both lakes, attracts many southern people, though it must charm all manner of people as well. Judge Small's, upon a point in the lake, is the most attractive, while the La Belle House, Bord du Lac, and the Jones House, with many others, afford comfort and diversion and rest to those in pursuit of any or all of these. Famed are the hops at Oconomowoc, and parties come even from far-off lakeside to attend them. One can do all things here. There is no better place to while away the time, and those who once taste the delights return again and again. For to know the pretty village is to love her, and her influence never grows less. K.P.M. End of section 1. Section 2 of Gems of the Northwest by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ted Lienhart. Waukesha, Wisconsin. Among the many summer resorts for which Wisconsin has become famous, there is probably none which has enjoyed a more deserved prosperity than Waukesha, nor an interior village whose name is familiar to so many people in this and foreign countries. To Waukesha belongs the credit of directing the eyes of pleasure seekers toward Wisconsin, and although other places can fairly lay claim to more natural beauty and picturesque scenery, it was the discovery of the health-restoring springs of Waukesha which diverted summer travelers from Saratoga and Newport and induced them to spend a season at Waukesha. So impressed did they become with the beauty of the place, the hospitable character of the people, and the miraculous power of its mineral waters to restore health, that by common consent the little village has become universally known as the Saratoga of the West. The first spring to be discovered, Bethesda, proved to be a veritable gold mine for the owner. By persistent efforts and most extensive advertising, Waukesha water became known throughout the civilized world. I remember having seen in a southern state several years ago a large placard announcing that a certain line of railroad with its connections was the only direct all-rail route to St. Louis, Chicago, Waukesha, Philadelphia, Washington, and New York. The word Waukesha was in big type, which indicated that railroad companies 1,000 miles away were anxious for a share of the passenger traffic to and from Waukesha. The numerous daily passenger trains which the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company runs to accommodate its Waukesha patrons is good evidence of the popularity of the village among pleasure and health seekers. A description of this beautiful place, the Paragon watering place of the Northwest, cannot but convey an imperfect conception of what the visitor will find upon personal examination. Although settled more than 30 years ago and now numbering 6,000 or 7,000 inhabitants, its people have ever resisted all attempts to establish a city government or any of those metropolitan appurtenances which would deprive the village of its charming rural simplicity, and which are just what people desire to escape from when they leave their city homes, with their crowded, dusty streets and the ceaseless roar of the business thoroughfares. Although more than old enough to vote, it still has village notions. About a dozen years ago, several prominent citizens undertook the work of planting shade trees. The work was done upon so extensive a scale that those who could not see into the future declared that the prominent citizens must be crazy upon the subject. Now every street on the south side of the river, excepting small portions of the 4 streets that radiate from the business center, is embowered with shade trees. The view from the high bluffs north of the river is surpassingly beautiful. Fine business blocks, elegant private residences, hotels and boarding houses, and imposing church edifices are discernible amid the great forest of shade as far as the eye can reach. No pen can do full justice to this beautiful picture. Although the mineral springs and the superb hotels constitute the first attraction, the handsome drives, well-kept lawns, and streets free from dust are the chief pride of the place. Any visitor to Waukesha during the past 10 years will freely endorse the most glowing account of the pleasures which a season in Waukesha affords. Fortunately for the thousands who annually run away from the annoying cares of city life, the means of reaching Waukesha are all that could be desired. Any one of the numerous trains of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway running out of Chicago daily brings you to Waukesha, a distance of about 100 miles, in a little over 3 hours. This ride in one of the sumptuously furnished parlor cars bearing the letters C, M, and St. P, passing through beauties of nature without parallel, is a genuine pleasure. Instead of the fatigue usually incident to rail journeys, the traveler steps from the coach at Waukesha as fresh as when he enters it. There are none but pleasant memories of the scenes along the route and of the comforts which the company so generously provide at a cost so trifling as to amaze people who have calculated a trip to the seaside. Arriving at Waukesha, the pleasure seeker, or invalid, finds just what he most needs: rest, comfort, amusement, superb hotel accommodations, etc. The Waukesha hotels are not surpassed anywhere, and except those who are aware of the fact that the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway brings from 8,000 to 10,000 strangers to Waukesha annually, it would be a matter of surprise that such first-class hostelries could be maintained in a country village. In pleasantness of location, luxurious furnishings, and courteous treatment of guests, they are unsurpassed anywhere. In driving about Waukesha, and knowing that much has been said and written, I am convinced that the half has not been told of its beauty and loveliness. Situated in the beautiful Fox River Valley, 20 miles west of Milwaukee, surrounded by green, round-capped hills and shaded by wide-spreading maple trees, is this charming spot. A little river, sparkling and dancing in the sunlight, meanders its way through the village. Its source is in Pewaukee Lake, 5 miles away, and it is well stocked with fish. Within 3 hours' drive are a dozen charming lakes, and sailing and fishing can be enjoyed to your heart's content. Inside the village, almost within gunshot of the post office, are the most innumerable springs. The principal one is, of course, that which made Waukesha famous, Bethesda. If that old Spanish warrior, Ponce de Leon, could wake from his sleep of 300 years and come to Waukesha, verily there would he find the fountain of perpetual youth and beauty. Methinks many Ponce de Leons have, after many weary searches, at last found it at Waukesha. The soft strains of an Italian orchestra, mingling with the songs of warbling birds, are stealing through the air. Groups are seated about the grounds, talking, laughing, reading, playing at lawn tennis, croquet, and other games. We drive through the grounds, everywhere noticing the well-kept lawns and gay parterres of flowers to please the eye. There are numerous other springs as well kept and as attractive, if not quite so famous, as Bethesda. The Glen, Hygeia, Silurian, Arcadian, White Rock, Fountain, Vesta, Clismic, Lithian, and the Lord only knows how many more, all have their loyal friends, and all are more or less worthy of the compliments they get. The lovely grounds and the delightful coolness and softness of the water are well worth a visit to Waukesha to see and enjoy. From some one of the myriad of springs, the city invalid is pretty sure to find a sovereign remedy for many of the ills of mankind. Physicians all over the country earnestly advocate the use of Waukesha water. Cures which seem little less than miraculous are being wrought every day. Confirmed invalids have been brought here, and in a short time have been given a new lease of life. I well remember years ago when Chief Justice Chase came to Waukesha. Unable to bear upon his limbs the weight of his body, he was supported by 2 servants from the cars to a carriage and driven to a hotel. His strength gone, he was a specimen of abject helplessness. A week's use of Waukesha water, and he could walk downstairs to the dining room. Another week, and he was able to walk the short distance that brought him to Bethesda Springs. He remained at Waukesha 2 months when he returned to his official duties at Washington. Before leaving, the people of Waukesha frequently witnessed a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States walking 8 or 10 miles daily out in the country over graveled roads and unattended. There is no question but that Waukesha water prolonged the life and usefulness of Salmon P. Chase several years. His malady, Bright's disease, was, however, too firmly entrenched in his system, and when it was revived in Washington years afterward, he was compelled to succumb. The people of Waukesha have unbounded faith in their mineral springs, and the testimony as to their efficacy can be piled up high enough to convince any skeptic. The season generally begins about the 1st of June and closes shortly before October. Although the most delightful time of the year is that when the golden leaves are falling and all the glories of Indian summer, with a cool, invigorating atmosphere imparting renewed life and energy to the human mind and system, are upon us, the village is nearly deserted by its summer visitors by the last of September. Then do the townspeople begin to plan additions to their facilities for accommodating and amusing guests for the succeeding year. The guests leave, regretting that their stay must necessarily be so short. They know, however, where to come next year, and they will remember their ride from Chicago to Waukesha and return over the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway when they again start for the Saratoga of the West. F. A. Markle. End of section 2. Section 3 of Gems of the Northwest by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain, read by Ted Lienhart. Palmyra and Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. The village of Palmyra is located on the Prairie du Chien division of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway, 42 miles west of Milwaukee and 54 miles east of Madison, the capital of the state. The country surrounding and tributary to Palmyra is generally high and rolling, rich in soil, and well adapted to the production of all kinds of grain and grasses in abundance, although in the immediate vicinity of the town it is somewhat sandy and not so fertile by nature, but more especially adapted to the growth of garden vegetables and small fruits. It is well watered by lakes and streams, and has the purest of water in its wells. Dairying is carried on quite extensively in this and adjoining towns. There are 3 cheese factories and 1 combined butter and cheese establishment within the limits of the township. The population is about 800. The town and vicinity is settled by an industrious and intellectual class of people, the greater portion of whom are Americans, but the Scandinavians, Germans, and Irish are represented. Spring Lake in the immediate vicinity, and other lakes and streams within easy drive, furnish abundance of fish and waterfowl to ensure this as a desirable point for pleasure seekers. In the town are two quite extensive brick hotels, the Tisch House and the Commercial Hotel. With its numerous mineral springs, pure water, facilities for fishing and hunting, and its healthy location, Palmyra offers some of the best inducements to those seeking health and pleasure. At this place is located one of the most extensive, well-equipped, and well-managed sanitariums in the West, erected in 1872 by Ira Bidwell, Esquire, and now the property of Colonel J. H. Davidson, St. Paul, Minnesota. Connected with this institution is a large number of mineral springs, not excelled for their health-giving properties. Added to the picturesque scenery round about Palmyra is one of the most wonderful curiosities of the West, a mammoth spring some 22 feet deep, located 1.5 miles southwest of the village. Beaver Dam, Wisconsin. 60 miles northwest of Milwaukee, on the northern division of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway, and on the eastern shore of a beautiful lake, surrounded by fertile prairies and graceful woodlands, is the charming little city of Beaver Dam. The morning train from the east brings you into the heart of the city, only a few steps from Park Avenue and the hotels and boarding houses, which offer a cordial welcome and comfortable quarters to the traveler for health and pleasure. A stroll along the well-built business streets shows the prosperity of the people, and a visit to the immense cotton mills and the large woolen factories and machine shops across the river reveals the substantial basis of the continued growth of the city. The homes of the people are uniformly attractive, and many of them as elegant as are found in our larger cities. Beaver Dam is remarkable for its comfortable homes and delightful scenery and healthful climate. There are many points of interest to the traveler, but the most attractive place of all is the elegant Vita Park, comprising 12 acres of ground handsomely laid out in lawns, flower gardens, and shady nooks and grassy slopes, with winding drives and walks that remind you of Lincoln Park in Chicago. The sparkling spring, which has become famous for its healing waters, pours out its liquid treasures from a marble basin in a pavilion as handsome as that which covers the Congress Spring in Saratoga. The water is cool and sweet, and of delicious purity, and runs through a chain of pretty lakes where children row their boats and sail their little ships. On the west side of the park, and only 4 blocks from the railroad station, is the Vita Park Hotel, a handsome 4-story building with wide halls and verandas which run around the house and afford splendid promenades and lovely views of the park and surrounding country. Dr. George E. Swan, the owner of the park and hotel, has made ample provision for the comfort and happiness of his guests and devotes himself to their entertainment during the entire season. In this vicinity are many places of interest, and there are delightful drives over prairie roads and gravelly hills in many directions. On the Waupun Road, there are many highly cultivated farms that are well worth a visit. The stock farm of William Bonner, brother of Robert Bonner, Esquire of the New York Ledger, is 4 miles out, and near to it is the famous Springbrook Farm and the large estates of the Gambles and the Warrens. There is no finer agricultural region in the world, and those who come here find everything in climate, scenery, and comfortable quarters to promote their health and happiness. T.S.J. End of section 3. Section 4 of Gems of the Northwest by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ted Lienhart. Dells of the Wisconsin. One of the ladies who came from Rhode Island to attend the annual meeting of the National Educational Association held at Madison, Wisconsin in July 1884, writes her impressions of the Dells of the Wisconsin as follows. Quote, "Of the beauties of lake-girdled Madison, the unparalleled success of the recent Educational Association held there, and of that free-handed Western hospitality where a city of 11,000 inhabitants welcomes and entertains a body of strangers equal to half her own population, I need not write, for with these points the Associated Press reports have, air now made all familiar. When it was known that our little state had sent 100 representatives to that convention, all felt that she had done her part. Of these, about 30 left Madison for a visit to the rocky wonders of the Wisconsin Dells. A 2 hours ride from Madison brought us to Kilburn City, a station on the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway, less than 200 miles from Chicago, where lay the 3 steamers which were to convey the crowd of tourists up the river. In the rush and scramble which ensued as we made our way down the steep incline to the wharf, it was hard to discover any trace of unbending pedagogues or prim and precise schoolma'ams in the crowd who had seemingly thrown dull care to the winds and set out for a grand gala day. When the swaying, surging crowd were fairly established, the steamers turned their prows upstream, and the weird, strange rock panorama began. The Wisconsin here varies in width from 50 to 300 feet, and is hemmed in by perpendicular walls which the swift-running water has worn into various grotesque and fantastic shapes. High rock and Romance Cliff, one on either bank, guard like huge sentinels the entrance. These in swift succession give place to Chimney Rock, to Chapel Gorge, and to many other fantastic formations. A little farther upstream, a break in the cliffs occurs, and here on a grassy plateau stands the old Dells Tavern, once the resort of raftsmen and lumbermen for miles around. Lone and deserted it stands today, and the sounds of wild revelry, which alone were wont to wake the echoes of the surrounding cliffs, have given way to the shrill whistle of passing steamers and the songs and merry laughter of happy excursion parties. At the Navy Yard, the old hulks stand out in bold relief, the resemblance so perfect that one is almost inclined to lift his eyes in search of spars or smokestack. Narrow canyons, whose sides are draped with graceful vines and delicate harebells, contrast with rocky battlements, rounded by the waves, or lifting themselves hundreds of feet on broken, precipitous walls, with not the slightest trace of verdure. But as someone has aptly said, it is at Witch's Gulch that the superlative wonder of the Dells is reached. The steamers remain there an hour or two, giving all an opportunity to thread their way through the rocky defile. At its entrance, far up on the rugged crag, can be seen the face of a hideous old hag, which has given the ravine its name. As one presses on, the walls contract, till, with each step, comes the feeling we surely can go no farther. Pausing involuntarily, we look up and stand awe-stricken and spellbound in nature's own art gallery. Far, far above us, the clear blue summer sky gleams through the sunlit foliage which arches over the chasm, throwing alternate lights and shades adown the rocky sides. The ferns and bluebells clinging to the clefts in the rocks are covered with moisture, which, touched by the sunshine, are like glistening diamonds. A step more, and the overhanging crags shut out the sunlight, and in a weird, dim light you grope on, while the sound of swift rushing water not far away gives you an uncertain sort of feeling which grows into unbounded admiration as suddenly the walls recede, leaving a circular opening through which the sunlight streams, revealing a beautiful waterfall. Whichever sounds and shines, a pillar of white light upon the wall of purple cliffs. Just here, one is quite apt to be roused from his reverie by the shrill, imperative whistle of the steamer and the returning footsteps of those who have preceded him. At some season, it is practicable to go still farther up the river, but the water was low at the time of our visit, and we were obliged to forego the trip to Stand Rock. On our way down, we stopped an hour at Coldwater Canyon. This is considered by some to surpass even Witch's Gulch, but although both are beautiful, we are a little bent in favor of the latter. A huge well in the midst of this canyon is known as the Devil's Jug, but what a Devil's Jug could be doing in Coldwater Canyon, I'm sure I fail to know. On our return trip, we passed several parties who were exploring in rowboats the caves and defiles. The guides, after we were on the steamer and our passage paid, assured us that that was the only way to see the Dells, but reserving that pleasure for our next visit, we hurried back to the station in order that we might spend the night at La Crosse. I would like to write of our charming ride thither and of the beauties of the residence portion of that thriving city as we viewed it by electric light, but must, with more than the speed of the iron horse, take you with me, as in the early morning we were borne along by the side of the Father of Rivers to the Twin Cities at the head of navigation. The wonders of this bluff region have a charm peculiarly their own. As we speed on, viewing Queen's Bluff, 600 feet high, traced in the castellated rocks, farther upstream the outlines of rocky fortresses and feudal castles, saw the counterpart sugar loaves at Winona and Lake City, and listened to the quaint Indian legends connected with them, looked in wonder at Trempealeau, mountain which dips in the sea, no heart but swelled with pride as he thought, "This is my own, my native land." Emma Shaw. End of section 4. Section 5 of Gems of the Northwest by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ted Lienhart. Madison, Wisconsin. In regard to her railroad facilities and easy connection with the outside world, Madison has not a superior in Wisconsin. In this particular, combined with the fact that during the summer season, reduced rates from all parts of the country are offered to tourists, she is fast becoming appreciated by the outside world, as is evidenced by the constantly increasing patronage of summer visitors. Two branches of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway, the Prairie du Chien and the Watertown, have depots here at East and West Madison, respectively. By these routes, all principal points in Wisconsin, Illinois, and Minnesota can be speedily reached, as well as all points to the west. And at Milwaukee and Chicago, connections are made with lake steamers and all the leading through railroad lines of the country. The city of Madison is girt by lakes, being situated upon an isthmus belt of land between Lakes Mendota and Monona. In nearly a direct line from northwest to southeast lies a chain of 4 limpid lakes, 4 naiads, connected by the Yahara River. Mendota is the uppermost and largest. It is about 9 miles long and a little northwest of the city. Monona lies on the other side to the southwest. Waukesha and Kegonsa complete the line, which may be counted as 5 if we accept Dead Lake, Wingra, and despite its name, there is no reason why it should be omitted. The beauties of Madison have enlisted many eloquent pens in their championship, but like the charms of the novelist's heroine, they must be seen to be appreciated. She is situated upon a mild, wide isthmus of lovely valleys, commanding hills and miniature plains, washed on either hand by 3rd and 4th lakes, the gems of the famous Quartet chain. Her noble elms and sturdy giant oaks, whether in the wooded dell or fringing some hillside slope with their dark green plumes, shed flitting checkered shade upon the greensward carpet down below. Threading the valley and winding the hill, and aslant the slope, are broad highways and bowling drives, and sauntering malls and shaded walks and sequestered lanes, over which the elms and oaks do oft-times meet, high up aloft, and form deep shaded bowers that glance but along the boulevard, and you see in summertime such vistas of leafy grottos that you'd think the fairies had chosen this for their earthly home. And then, amid it all, down in the valley, along the ridge, breasting the hillside, arise mansions that rival the villas of the Hudson, graceful in architecture, beautiful in their soft, cream-colored tints in brick and sandstone, spacious in their grounds, and embowered in forest trees and blooming flower plats, all threaded by pebbly walks and carriage drives, with the lake beach pebbles down the hill, playing with the dancing, splashing, dashing waves, and echoing their cheery music till the air blossoms with melody. The Capitol Park comprises a magnificent grove of 14 acres, through which broad asphalt drives and tree-arched malls are laid with artistic grace. A stately fountain, from the Centennial Exposition graces the lawn near the east portal, an iron railing costing over $30,000, with numerous fine cut stone gate and driveway posts, surmounted by statues, surround the park as a gorgeous frame. The trees are many and large, forming a leafy grotto from earliest summer to late in autumn, with seats beneath the shade for talking age and whispering lovers made. As a whole, the Capitol Park is the gem of Madison, and being in the center of the city, the interests of Madisonians cluster around it at all seasons of the year, particularly in the summer when it stands without a rival for arboreal loveliness. The city bands discourse music thrice a week from a balcony upon the northeast lawn, and their delightful strains are wafted through the trees upon the evening air to all quarters of the town, citizens lolling upon their open balconies and piazzas, enjoying the blessings of divine symphonies in the midst of the charms of blooming gardens and the Italian twilight softening all. Among the many attractions of the charming city of the lakes, not the least are the numerous pleasant drives and delightful points for picnics, excursions, etc. No city in the West can make a better showing in these things that add so much to the pleasure of summer visitors. The favorite drive of Madisonians is known as the University Drive, winding through the spacious and beautiful grounds of that institution, over the hill, where on the summit the central building is located, from which high point excellent views of the city and glimpses of the unsurpassed farming country for miles around are obtained. Through a woody ravine on the rocky shore of Lake Mendota, along which the road runs for a mile or more, when, suddenly turning to the west, it passes through a young forest into the celebrated experimental farm over Observatory Ridge and out of the grounds at the gates near Ladies' Hall, the library building or science hall, making, in all, a short carriage drive of 3 miles, unequaled for beauty anywhere in the country. It is difficult to imagine anything more exquisitely beautiful than a sunset witnessed from the shore of Lake Mendota, and every pleasant evening during the summer and fall months, the drive is thronged with carriages of Madisonians and summer visitors. Tanyawatha Springs Hotel, on the southeast shore of Lake Monona, 3 miles across the water from Madison, is a charming spot. The water of the mineral springs is considered equal to the best at Waukesha, the chemical analysis being quite similar. The hotel is very extensive, having all the modern conveniences with billiard hall, bowling alley, bathhouses, row and sailboats, etc. It is conducted upon the most approved plan. There is not a finer summer resort anywhere in the country, and the table d'hôte is superb. The view of the city and surrounding four-lake country is charming. Steamers run constantly to and from Tanyawatha and the city. There are also excellent accommodations for summer visitors at Winnequa, McKnight's Point, and other places on the shores of both lakes. In the city itself are located numerous fine hotels, the Park, Villas, and the Capitol being the principal ones, while boarding houses abound in great profusion. In them, the tourist may find homes graded in locations, styles, and prices according to his fancy or means. End of section 5. Section 6 of Gems of the Northwest by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ted Lienhart. Sparta, Wisconsin. 255 miles from Chicago, on the La Crosse division of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway, is located the charming city of Sparta, with a population of 5,000, enjoying a wide reputation as a popular summer resort, both for the health seeker and tourist. Its altitude being one of the highest in the state, the atmosphere is noted for its remarkable purity and is wonderfully exhilarating. It is this pure air, free from moisture and the taints of miasmatic sections, that affords the invigorating and healing influences so essential to weakened lungs, oxygenizing the blood and imparting new life and vigor to the enfeebled physical powers. The influences of the air, in connection with the curative properties of the famous mineral springs of Sparta, have established it as one of the principal spas of the country, 16 artesian wells having been sunk in different parts of the town since the first discovery of the merits of the water in 1869. There is a very large proportion of iron in the water, so much that a new tin drinking cup very soon becomes of a beautiful golden color, but after a certain period of use loses its beauty and looks simply covered with iron rust. There are also various sulfates and salts that combine curative properties, and like other springs in the state, the waters are likened to the well-known Ems springs in Germany. Sufferers from bronchitis, paralysis, rheumatism, and many other diseases find relief or cure here. Many sufferers, too, who have not been benefited at the hot springs of Arkansas, have been permanently cured here. The Turkish Bath Institute, connected with the Warner House, is supplied with the mineral water from a well in the garden, which is 500 feet deep, and the dry heat, together with the free use of the water as a beverage and in the shampooing and showering process, are pronounced very efficient in conquering even the most stubborn cases of long-standing suffering. Associated with the tonic properties of the water are found the salts of soda, magnesia, lithia, sodium, etc., minutely proportioned and held in perfect solution, forming a pure chalybeate, peculiarly adapted to the relief and cure of all cases of nervous debility, derangement of the blood, etc. Eminent medical skill will be found at Sparta, and excellent accommodations at the hotels. The hotels and numerous private boarding houses vie with each other in excellence of accommodations, the prices at each being moderate. Fine liveries are supplied by several well-kept stables, the beauty of the surrounding country inviting to daily drives. For surrounding scenery, Sparta is like no other place we have visited. One cannot enter it from any direction except by passing through tunnels or deep cuts through the bluffs, or mountains as they are called, that completely encircle the village. Among the prominent attractions of scenery are Castle Rock, Chimney Rock, Hollow Bluff, Lone Rock, Twin Bluffs, and the Devil's Chimney, all having historic legends. To the northwest stands Castle Rock. From its summit, a varied panorama of hill and dale and different bodies of water can be seen. Indeed, for many miles, as far as the vision will reach, even to the hills of Minnesota, across the Mississippi River, a picture of exceeding beauty is presented. Hollow Bluff is another wonder, and as its name suggests, is evidently hollow, for you may strike it anywhere and it will resound like an empty stone vessel, though no entrance can be found through which to explore its probable cavern. Upon its highest point has been erected a rough observatory, which no tourist fails to visit, that he may get the fine view of the town and environs. There is a chimney rock here also, and many other curiosities, bluffs that challenge the venturesome to perilous climbing for several hundred feet, where, in some places, there are only narrow, shelving rocks that furnish a foothold for only one person at a time, and one false step would send him to the depths below. There are at least a half-dozen famous trout streams within a short distance of the city, where there are unknown numbers of the speckled beauties only waiting for a tempting bait. There are picturesque drives and good roads, picnic points and shady groves, enough to keep one busy sightseeing for many days or weeks. End of section 6. Section 7 of Gems of the Northwest by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain, read by Ted Lienhart. The Upper Mississippi River. The Upper Mississippi Valley is all historic and classic, both land and water, being the theater of some of the most thrilling incidents in American history, and of the most interesting and stirring legends and traditions. La Crosse is a city of some 15,000 inhabitants located on the Mississippi the site of the present city for many generations, having been the great ball-playing ground of the Indian tribes for many 100 miles around. The early French visitors called the peculiar game played by the Aborigines lacrosse, and from it the present important manufacturing and commercial city has derived its name. Lacrosse has grown wonderfully since we passed it on one of those fine old steamers which formerly plowed the current of the majestic river in the ante-railway days. It was then a flourishing trading post for lumbermen, raftsmen, and steamboatmen, Indians, and the farming regions and villages of the vicinity, though it is still that and more. As the country has increased in wealth, the wants of the people are more numerous, and as refinement has advanced, different lines of trade supervene, and the lacrosse of today is abreast with the spirit and requirements of the age. Beyond lacrosse is the city of Winona, Minnesota. Nature seems to have intended this place for the site of just such a city, full of life, full of enjoyment, full of beauty, nestling so closely in a nook of the bluffs which here are so broad, from starboard to larboard, as to form one of the loveliest plateaus in the valley of this royal river. Fair Winona, substantial as beautiful, prosperous as substantial, happy as both. But we must not dismiss so summarily the route from lacrosse here. On the cars, one has nearly as fine a view of the scenery as from the deck of a steamer. At some age of the world, this was such a river as takes a wide stretch of imagination to conceive an idea of, when it filled the space between the bluffs on either side. What a grand succession of grand firths and rushing torrents. We pass Meniska, a lovely hamlet, and some other stations on the fly, and heave to at Waukesha, a substantial burg at the southern extremity of Lake Pepin, and opposite to the mouth of the famed Chippewa River, which here forms an offensive and defensive alliance with the Mississippi. Waukesha was the grand capital of the great Sioux nation. Here blazed the council fires of the Sioux and Dakota tribes. Here they held their congresses and organized star routes. Here their warpaths converged, and the footprints of their captives all pointed in the direction of this, their grand city of magnificent distances, from which it might be inferred that it was a very captivating place for those in such circumstances. This is far from being all that tends to make the place interesting. Here are traces of a still older race of the human species, and the archaeologist may find ample opportunity for the pursuit of his special and interesting science. As in other places along the Mississippi, the mound builders have here left evidences of their handiwork. Hundreds of mounds surround this city, inviting the curious to speculation or research. The road between Waukesha and Reed's Landing and Lake City discounts any railway in this country for romantic and picturesque location, following the sinuosities of the giant bluffs, hugging their base, and almost laved by the waters of Lake Pepin, yet at a secure elevation above the beach. A short distance above Lake City, located on the shore of Lake Pepin, surrounded by picturesque scenery unsurpassed in America, and pronounced by Bayard Taylor and other traveled tourists to be the rival of the Hudson River and the famous Rhine, is Frontenac, an embryo Long Branch and prophetic of being one of the most sought-after of the attractions of this mighty state. It is yet but a hamlet, built upon a splendid plateau, slightly away from the lake, descending to the beach by a gentle slope, a long cape extending far into the waters, thus forming, with an opposite headland, a magnificent bay, magnificent buttes stretching away for miles, the scenery presenting a variety of green slopes, fields golden with grain, bold, rocky bluffs, and valleys that extend back from the lake until they are lost on the distant prairie, little villages and villas perched high above the water, making a picture that is charming in the extreme. The country surrounding Frontenac is famous for its shooting. Within a distance of 10 or 15 miles, the best of shooting that Minnesota affords may be found, and across the lake in Wisconsin are numberless trout streams, easy of access, so that sportsmen will find all they need to keep them busy. Prairie chickens are always abundant in their season, especially on the prairies of Minnesota in this vicinity. Excursions to the villages of Maiden Rock, Lake City, and other points are of frequent occurrence, a steamer making regular daily trips along the lake and stopping at Lake City for passengers. From Frontenac to Red Wing, with a stupendous promontory of Barn Bluff overlooking the city, thence to Hastings and onward to St. Paul, there is a constant succession of views which would charm an anchorite and command the admiration of every lover of the beautiful in nature. End of section 7. Section 8 of Gems of the Northwest by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ted Lienhart. Frontenac and Lake Pepin. Leaving Lake City, our train spins for a few moments close to the edge of the sparkling waters, then takes a long, sweeping curve inland and is lost between fields of waving corn. Suddenly we stop at a quiet little country station. Frontenac, shouts the brakeman, and we look curiously around in search of the scenery that has been termed unrivaled in the Northwest. We may look in vain at the station, but take that red stage with Lakeside Hotel upon its side, and in 5 minutes we are whirling off eastward toward the lake. A short mile through fields of wheat and barley brings us to the brow of a commanding height. To our right is a pretty little brown church with its stained glass windows. To our left, bowered amid the beautiful oaks and surrounded with carefully tended lawn and flower beds, is the picturesque homestead of General McLean. Down the slope we speed, passing the shaded park and through a lane of quiet country homes. And suddenly we draw up at the very verge of the broad plateau, and Pepin, in all its wondrous and varied beauty, lies before and beneath us. A broad road skirts the edge of the plateau, along which, fronting road and lake, are placed at intervals several large and commodious cottages and frame houses, the property of General Girard. St. Hubert's is here immediately to our right. Winona lies off there to the left. The limpid waters plash at the very foot of the bluff on which we stand, and stretch away in unruffled beauty for miles to our right and left. Down to the southeast, the eye roams over a lovely expanse of placid lake and wooded points, over the distant spires of the little city, and the bold line of rolling bluffs that span the southern horizon and bend the waters eastward. Across the lake, 3 miles away, are the grand cliffs and palisades, standing like vertical barriers against the eastern sky, and looking squarely down into their images in the waters at their feet. That massive cliff over to the right front is Maiden's Leap, famed in song and story. The smiling villages farther down on the Wisconsin shore are Stockholm and Pepin, and off here to the northward, right against the wooded hillsides, is the little town of Maiden Rock. Famous trout streams are they which come tumbling down those opposite gorges into the lake. Marvelous are the effects of light and shade to be noted any sunny day on those bluffs and crags, and across those rippling waters, and as for sunsets, Frontenac challenges the world. There stands the hotel, the big white building down on the low point beneath us. It nestles with its cottages close under the shoulder of the huge bluff to our left, and on those wonderful days when the north winds come roaring down the Waukesha Reach and lashing the bosom of the lake into foam, sending huge waves booming upon the rocks on the opposite shore, and whirling white columns of spray high in air, you can sit here on that point in perfect peace and security, sheltered from every whistle of the gale, watching all the gorgeous storm effect, yet feeling not the faintest buffet of its wrath. Wonderful, too, is the grand view from the summit of that protecting bluff. The great Tappan Zee of the Hudson is not so fine. The broad valley of the Mississippi has nowhere a beauty to compare with this of Pepin, and Pepin has no gem that matches Frontenac. If you love nature, here, as in no other spot in all the Great West, can one commune with her in all her varied phases. If you are a material and would eat, drink, smoke, and sleep, fish and bathe, row and paddle, sail and drive, the lakeside will minister to your every want. For particulars, see small bills. But if you think you have seen the Northwest or know its beauty, you are mistaken unless you have seen Frontenac. Charles King, Captain, USA. End of section 8. Section 9 of Gems of the Northwest by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain, read by Ted Lienhart. St. Paul and Minneapolis. These twin cities, lying only 10 miles apart, are easily reached by the various lines of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway. The site of St. Paul combines great natural beauty with peculiar adaptation to the requirements of a large city. At this point, there is a depression in the high bluffs which border the Mississippi. Within lies a great basin, with a gentle ascent on two sides to the breezy summits of the surrounding hills. This basin is marked out by nature for the business part of the city. Its lowest portion is occupied by blocks of huge buildings devoted to the wholesale trade established here. The upper portion, nearer the foot of the steeper ascents, is chiefly devoted to retail houses, while residences climb the heights and line the streets which stretch for miles along the plateaus extending back from the summits of the circling bluffs. Taken as a whole, the location has some striking resemblances to that of Cincinnati, a likeness which was pointed out as early as 1854. The hill additions are the favorite sites for private buildings, and along the summit of that which overlooks the Mississippi are miles of stately homes, which are making it a worthy rival of the famous Avenue of Cleveland. The average visitor to St. Paul notices the majestic expanse of river and the terraced highlands that encircle the city, views Fort Snelling with the awe incident to historical association, looks with pleased surprise upon the beauties of Minnehaha Falls, and votes the capital city and its surroundings surpassingly beautiful. The country immediately north of St. Paul is fairly a network of lovely lakes. In every dimple of prairie, in every depression of woodland, is set a crystal gem that in any other locality would be considered an invaluable addition to the surrounding landscape. All of the lakes are of great beauty of outline and surroundings, of purest water, connected with each other by rapid running brooks, and finally lending outlet to the Mississippi River. Irregular contour of coastlines of every variety of surface, here a gentle wooded slope, there a bold cliff, or again a grassy vale, contribute to the exquisite beauty of these lakes. Not one in all the number presents many perfect residence sites, locations that combine natural groves, gravel, or sand beach, and almost any desired land surface. All of these waters teem with fish. Black and silver bass especially are clear and cold, and from 40 to 60 feet deep in their deepest parts. No large city on the continent has such a delightful suburban district. St. Paul is eminently a commercial city. During the past year, the wholesale trade reached over $75 million. The number of wholesale houses was 396. The number of manufacturing establishments was 843, employing 15,725 persons, and the total value of the products manufactured amounted to nearly $27 million. The amount of capital invested in buildings during the year was $7,266,477. This capital was so divided as to give St. Paul about 2 miles of additional fronts of business houses and 8 miles of additional fronts of residences. The death rate for the year was only 11.65 to each 1,000 of population, less than that of any other city in the world containing so large a population. The banking capital of the city reaches the sum of $6,350,000 of capital stock, with deposits exceeding $11 million and an annual sale of exchange reaching the enormous aggregate of something over $100 million. The principal hotels of St. Paul are the magnificent Ryan, with its 450 elegantly furnished rooms accommodating 900 guests, merchants, and Windsor. There are many other smaller hotels of various grades of excellence. St. Paul claims a population of 115,000. The city of Minneapolis is situated upon both sides of the Mississippi River at the Falls of St. Anthony in the eastern part of Hennepin County. The area included within the city limits reaches 7½ miles from north to south and about 6¼ miles from east to west, embracing approximately 33 square miles. This area contains, in its southwest part, a beautiful series of lakes, namely Cedar Lake, the Lake of the Isles, Lake Calhoun, and Lake Harriet, each about a mile in length. Bassett's Creek is the principal affluent to the Mississippi from the west within the city limits, and 3 smaller streams fall into the river from the east. The surface of the country is level, the ground is high, and the streets and avenues are of an average width of 100 feet. Valuable limestone underlies portions of the city, and from many excavations sufficient stone has been removed to construct the buildings erected upon the site. The river flows through the city and is spanned by 3 footbridges, 1 suspension, 2 railroad bridges, and a stone arch viaduct crossing the stream on a curve at the falls. Minneapolis is undoubtedly the greatest wheat market in America, besides being the manufacturing center for the new Northwest. The day cannot be far distant when the aggregate of the miscellaneous products of Minneapolis factories will far exceed the combined totals of the now predominant interest, the flour and the sawmills. Already a great number and variety of establishments have found place for themselves and market for their goods. Agricultural and general machinery, cars, furniture, hardware and stoves, wagons and carriages, sash and doors, bricks, millie furnishings, barrels, harness, clothing, boots and shoes, crackers, cigar and beer are articles of home production on a large scale. During the past year, 12,605 men were employed in the production of these miscellaneous articles within the limits of the city to the amount of $26 million. It is noticeable that nearly 3 times as many men are employed in miscellaneous manufactures as in the manufacture of lumber and flour combined. The total of manufactures, including flour and lumber, reached $60,347,000, showing an increase over the preceding year of $13,720,000. In the matter of hotels, Minneapolis is well supplied. The New West Hotel is without a superior in America in elegance of finishing and furnishing. It is 8 stories in height and contains nearly 500 rooms. Its cost was about $1,500,000. The Nicollet House, the Windsor, and the St. James Hotels are located in the heart of the city. The Lindale, on the shore of Lake Calhoun, 2½ miles from the business center, is a superb summer hotel. Minneapolis claims a population of 129,200. The Falls of Minnehaha, the laughing water of Longfellow's verse, has won so wide a fame that anything more than a passing reference to its beauties is unnecessary. The falls are situated about 6 miles a little to the southeast of Minneapolis and on the line of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway. They are supplied by Minnehaha Creek, the outlet of Minnetonka, and smaller lakes surrounding the southern and southwestern portions of the city. They are 50 feet in height, and the rocks over which the water falls have undergone a recession similar to that observed at the Falls of St. Anthony. Always picturesque, they are peculiarly so in the winter season, when the formation of the ice about the cataract adds a stranger beauty to the scene that is ordinarily its own. Other and smaller cataracts are found within the limits or in the immediate neighborhood of Minneapolis. Among the most picturesque of these are the Silver Cascade and the Bridal Veil Falls, formed by small streams of water plunging into the Mississippi. The Bridal Veil Falls is on the east bank of the river, opposite 17th Street South. The Falls of St. Anthony are in the city itself. Fort Snelling may be reached from St. Paul or Minneapolis by the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway, or by carriage via Minnehaha. It lies a short distance to the south of the Laughing Water. The fort is the Army headquarters of the Department of Dakota and is used as a station for reserve troops employed on the Indian frontier. With the old fort building is associated many memories of pioneer days and of the Indian outbreaks which harassed the peace and safety of the new settlers. It is built upon a rock bluff on the banks of the Mississippi, overlooking the valleys of both the Minnesota and Mississippi rivers, which have their junction at this point. The view from this bluff is said to be the finest in the Northwest, and is certainly wonderfully picturesque. The summer months are voted perfect by the large and yearly increasing throng of summer visitors who now frequent the fashionable resorts in St. Paul, Minneapolis, and vicinity. And if these same visitors would remain through the glories of one Indian summer and the health-giving months of a bright, crisp, invigorating winter, they would be unwilling to give up residence here for the mud, slop, and chills of their own less favored localities. End of section 9. Section 10 of Gems of the Northwest by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ted Lienhart. Lake Minnetonka and other Minnesota lakes. Lake Minnetonka. This most beautiful of Minnesota's lakes is situated upon the main line of the St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Manitoba Railway, but 25 miles northwest of St. Paul and 15 from Minneapolis, being by its proximity to these cities rather a suburb than a summer resort, and accessible by trains at any hour of the day, yet so bountifully has nature dealt with it that it can never lose its primeval freshness. Quiet recesses along the indentations, which are its most remarkable feature, will ever preserve their characteristic wildness, and beyond what may be desirable in the way of beautification and adornment, the hand of man can never undo what the hand of nature with such unerring skill has wrought. The chief sources of the wonderment which fills him who for the first time visits and explores this lake are its size and its marvelous length of shoreline. Although by the most direct line that can be taken it is but 15 miles from one extremity to the other, there are 104 miles of coastline, so indented and broken up by myriads of tiny bays and enticing coves is the contour of the line where land and water meet. The surface of the shores vies with its edge in picturesque irregularities, now shooting up into stately headlands, now jutting boldly out in commanding promontories, now stretching back in an inviting expanse of gently sloping acclivities, and now rising into mounds that might well be the handiwork of some forgotten race. It does its part in creating the loveliness that is not likely to be forgotten by one whom summer idleness has lured to Minnetonka. Counting only the more important depressions which invade the shoreline, 25 bays break up the continuity of the lake, turning it into a chain of lakelets, like the series of connecting chambers in the Arabian tale, where the riches of one could scarcely stimulate the imagination of the beholder to conceive of the magnificence of the next. Lake Minnetonka has been characterized, without exaggeration, as one of the most wonderful bodies of water in the world. In some places, the land's edge rises abruptly from the crystal depths, but for the most part, it slopes gradually to the cool welcome of the waiting waves, now with a pebble-sprinkled beach, and now with a shining border of beautiful hard white sand. There are innumerable sequestered nooks where the most delightful and invigorating of baths that nature has to offer await the eager explorer of the transparent depths. One may spend weeks in sailing over these retiring bays, and on every expedition discover something new and charming. Sick and well, merry and sad, quiet and gay, can find places suited to their tastes in the great hotels which line the shore, or in retired glades where one can lie lazily in his hammock or stretch at full length upon the turf, and gazing upward or outward through interlacing branches of grand old forest trees, forget the cares of the present in such a blissful rest as it is worth a lifetime of labor to earn and to enjoy. The first view of the lake discloses only the bays which lie at the extreme eastern end, and the only indication of its really vast extent is afforded by the fleet of magnificent steamers waiting in readiness to convey travelers to any of the numerous stopping places around its shores. The boats which ply the lake are splendid side-wheelers, the largest capable of carrying 2,000 passengers with ease, and as finely furnished and fitted as any craft that can be found upon an inland lake. Extensive open promenade decks, luxuriously furnished cabins, and every facility for comforting the inner man have been provided, and the lazily disposed can make and repeat the tour of the lake, seeing the prominent features of interest and penetrating all but the most retired and inaccessible spots, with all the comfort and convenience that are at their command in a journey from Albany to New York. The principal hotels of Lake Minnetonka are so essentially a feature of the place and add so much by their architectural beauty to its natural attractions that they are deserving of mention as matters of public interest. The Lake Park Hotel lies about a mile to the north of Excelsior, upon what is known as the Minnetonka Lake Park. The latter is in itself a beautiful peninsula, to which the towers and frontage of the hotel add grace of form and harmony of color. The hotel, which is surrounded by several handsome summer cottages, is 4 stories in height, 60 feet wide, and 400 feet long. It has ample accommodations for 500 people. The Hotel Lafayette stands upon a peninsula known as Minnetonka Beach, the view of which it forms a picturesque part, and the equally fine prospect from its own towers are among the most beautiful upon the lake. The hotel was built in 1882 by the St. Paul, Minneapolis, and Manitoba Railway Company. It has a frontage of 800 feet, a height of 4 stories, and a capacity for accommodating nearly 1,000 guests. The railroad has a station at the hotel, and the steamboats a dock, which they visit at each regular trip. The Hotel St. Louis occupies an equally fine point of ground and is only second to the Lake Park and the Lafayette in capacity. It is placed upon the southern shore of the lake in a retreating curve of land enclosing a large bay, and lies upon high wooded grounds. The roof of the building commands a wide and beautiful prospect. It has 300 feet of frontage at a height of 3 stories. It can furnish nearly 200 rooms. A number of smaller hotels enjoy a leading reputation as successful hostelries, but possess no special architectural features to draw attention to them. Other Minnesota lakes. White Bear Lake. Here, upon a beautiful lake, are the summer cottages of many of the wealthiest residents of St. Paul. It is the seat of 4 hotels, which are all fashionable resorts, the popular camping ground of the state militia of Minnesota, and the annual meeting place of the Matomedi Assembly. The shores of White Bear seem to have been treated by nature in a masterly attempt at landscape gardening. In all the 20 or more miles of shoreline, there is scarcely a foot that is not perfect for residence grounds. The waters are clear, deep, very cold, and abound in an endless variety of fish. White Bear is 10 miles by railroad, St. Paul and Duluth, from St. Paul, and numerous trains make it a convenient as well as delightful summer residence. White Bear is not only a favorite retreat for St. Paul people, but its hotels are thronged with visitors from the east and south during the season, and it is now recognized as one of the most fashionable of all the northwestern summer resorts. Prior Lake, 45 miles from Minneapolis, on the Hastings and Dakota division of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway, is one of those gems of inland seas for which this region is so justly famous, with plenty of room and plenty of welcome for all who feel the need of recuperation or who desire the sport of fishing or hunting. The lake is 7 miles long, varying from 3/4 of a mile to 2 miles in width, and like most forest lakes, the shore is irregular and undulating, diversified by bold promontories and deep vales. At the south end, divided by a narrow isthmus, is Spring Lake, nearly circular in form. This lake is fed by numerous springs, by reason of which the water is very cool and wonderfully clear, making it an excellent home for the finest kind of fish, and they have not been slow in appropriating it. Prior Lake is nearly surrounded by a growth of large timber. Several lovely islands dot its surface, and in many places around the lake, farms have been cleared up and are under a fine state of cultivation. These facts clearly prove that here are all the elements of picturesqueness which form the type of the lake region of this wonderful state. Salmon and trout have been deposited in large numbers in the lake and are doing well. About the shores there is an abundance of game, consisting of deer, grouse, prairie chickens, quail, squirrel, rabbit, duck, geese, and woodcock. Hotel accommodations are very good, and the facilities for camping, rowing, and sailing excellent. Big Stone Lake at Ortonville, also on the Hastings and Dakota Division of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway, separates Minnesota from Dakota. This lake is about 30 miles long and is one of the grandest bodies of water in the mighty Northwest. It is well supplied with yachts, steam, row, and sailboats, and all appliances for navigation afloat on the waters of the Great Lake country. The shores are immensely grand and beautiful. The waters swarm with almost every species of the finny tribe common to freshwater seas. Hotel accommodations are good, with promise of greater excellence. The place is already becoming noted as a fine and popular resort, and will compare favorably with the best. End of section 10. Section 11 of Gems of the Northwest by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ted Lienhart. Lakes Okoboji, Spirit, and Clear Lakes. Lakes Okoboji. Until quite lately, this remarkable chain of lakes has lain hidden away from the knowledge and gaze of the great world, known only to the Indian and the lowly pioneer. The lakes Okoboji are situated in Dickinson County, Iowa, just south of the Minnesota line. In the summer of 1882, the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway constructed a branch from its Iowa and Dakota division to the lakes. This branch makes a detour of some 17 miles northward from Spencer. The system comprises several lakes, all connected, yet each possessing a character peculiar to itself, Spirit Lake and the two Okobojis being the largest, but several of the smaller lakes possess much beauty and are much frequented by sportsmen. Spirit Lake, which lies to the extreme north, is nearly circular in form, its greatest length and width being about 4 miles. It has an average depth of 16 feet and an area of 5,600 acres. The two Okobojis are connected at their southern extremity, and like two long arms stretched northward, embracing a high and undulating peninsula. Gar Lake and the Little Sioux River are the outlets. West Okoboji is, beyond all question, the gem of all this lake country. Its greatest length is 5.5 miles. Its shores are deeply indented by picturesque bays, which give it 18 3/4 miles of shoreline and a great variety of beaches. Its waters are said to be over 140 feet deep in places and are of an almost crystalline purity. Its area is 4,000 acres. East Okoboji has the general appearance of a peaceful and gently flowing river rather than lake. It forms an important connecting link between the other lakes, which taken together give opportunity for 75 miles sail. All these lakes abound in fish. Buffalo fish, nose sturgeon, pike, pickerel, crappies, black and rock bass, and perch are native to the waters, while trout and silver bass have been introduced through the agency of the Iowa Fish Commission, which has a hatchery located at Spirit Lake. On the western shore of West Okoboji is a mineral spring, the water of which is free from organic impurities and must possess a health-giving value similar to the now famous medicinal springs of Waukesha. The Indians are said to have known and appreciated the medicinal value of this spring, and tradition relates that Okoboji, spirit of deep waters, a mighty chief who ruled all the tribes of the Sioux, had his wigwam nearby. There are many traditions connected with this lovely region which show that it has been the theater of romantic interest and poetic inspiration among the Indians. A party of capitalists have purchased a tract of 540 acres lying on the high peninsula between the lakes Okoboji. This tract has a lake frontage of about 5 miles, securing a great diversity of beaches and lake views. The interior is charmingly interspersed with hill and dale, and embellished with a number of little lakelets, while fine old forest trees carry a grateful shade to the water's edge. The plans of the Lakes Okoboji Park Company include the platting of a town to be located midway between the two lakes, the building and operating of boats, besides the erection of a summer hotel, which is to crown the fine elevation back of Dixon's Beach. There are already numerous lodges and hotels conveniently and pleasantly located on the different lakes. Arnold's at Arnold's Park and Smith's on West Okoboji, Crandall's Lodge, and the Hotel Orleans on Spirit Lake. The latter house, completed in the summer of 1883, is splendidly equipped. There are also 2 or 3 hotels which make special arrangements for summer guests in the village of Spirit Lake. Communication is had between the different points by both boat and rail. Clear Lake is the Chautauqua of the West in the Methodist line. The location of the grounds is most attractive, being on the high shore of the lake overlooking its broad expanse of crystal waters. Clear Lake is the most southern of the lakes in the Northwest, so famous as summer resorts, and during the 7 years since its debut as the grand religious rollicking park, it has achieved a national reputation and is all that such a place should be. It has the capacity, too, for being all that the truly good, who do not consider it necessary to be in a constant funeral procession in order to be out of reach of the devil, can desire. The water is delightful for bathing, splendid for sailing and rowing, will quench thirst in a healthy manner, and, when mixed with sugar, seasoned with lemon juice and cooled by ice in proper proportions, makes a pleasant beverage which any king might covet if sober enough. There is a lovely island in the center of the lake, the trysting place of picnickers. There is plenty of game, and as for mineral waters, why, the wells hereabout will renovate dilapidated constitutions and recuperate overwrought physical energies so effectually as to render them a grand desideratum in a place devoted to camp meetings. Ample forests of native shade trees, beautiful drives, cozy walks, and romantic nooks are abundant. During the summer excursion season, Clear Lake is made a rendezvous for the Iowa State Teachers Association, the Sunday School Assembly of the Northwest, Ministerial and Theological Institute of the Northwest, Clear Lake Camp Meeting Association, and the Musical Convention of the Northwest, which certainly forms a bill that ought to draw, indeed you would think so, to see the grand rush from all parts of Iowa and its neighboring states from June till October. There is room and verge enough, beds and board enough, entertainment and enjoyment enough to suit the most sedate or the most joyful, with nothing to offend the most fastidious, as the rural showmen advertise. End of section 11. Section 12 of Gems of the Northwest by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ted Lienhart. My Trip to the Yellowstone Park, Part 1. The national park occupies the northwest corner of Wyoming, with the narrow strips of Idaho and Montana territories. It has an area of 55 miles from east to west and 65 from north to south, or about 3,575 square miles. My route from Chicago to St. Paul in the latter part of August 1884 was by way of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway. Leaving St. Paul via the Northern Pacific Railroad, the first view of the Yellowstone River is obtained at Glendive, Montana, 700 miles west of St. Paul, and for 340 miles the railroad follows its valley through a rich grazing country until Livingston is reached, where a change of cars is made. From Livingston, we continue along the valley a long distance, 51 miles, to Cinnabar, the end of the track. No more delightful scenery is found in the park proper than that enjoyed during this 3 hours' ride. The track winds through the valley, the river in full view, its banks studded with graceful willow trees. On either side of the valley rise mountains, many of which are snow-capped, the most prominent being Mount Emigrant, its peak towering 9,000 feet above the sea level. After passing up the valley about 30 miles, the lower canyon of the Yellowstone is entered, through which we creep along the mountainside, in many places on a mere shelf cut out of the rock, which rises almost perpendicularly thousands of feet above, while directly below the boiling torrent is hurrying on. Passing through this narrow gorge, and once more breathing with ease for a few moments, another equally hazardous gorge is entered, and finally a third, out of which we are ushered into a narrow valley, with the village of Cinnabar in view. Cinnabar consists of 4 houses and a depot and a boxcar. Here innumerable vehicles, from a Concord coach to a buttboard wagon, are in readiness, with their owners soliciting patronage for the ride to Mammoth Hot Springs, a distance of 8 miles. Fare $2 and $1 extra for each trunk. In a few moments we are off for the 2 hours' ride. The little town of Gardner, of 200 inhabitants, is passed 2 miles farther on, to which place the railroad is graded. After leaving here, the ascent is continual for nearly 4 miles, and some views obtained are strikingly beautiful. The one from the top of the divide looking north is particularly grand, with the Gardner River, a most energetic little stream, below us at the east, running north, and the Yellowstone, 4 miles to the north, running west, the confluence of the two in the valley below, the whole surrounded by mountains covered with vegetation which distance makes appear of a most delicate shade of light brown, resembling velvet, while to the west and directly above stands Electric Mountain, 11,000 feet high, with snowy peaks in dazzling contrast, making a scene long to be remembered. 2 miles farther on, we come suddenly to the crest of a hill, at the foot of which lies the Mammoth Hot Springs Hotel. This hill is a fitting prelude to what may be expected farther on. With a crack of the whip and horses on a run, as per regulations, we are landed in front of the hotel just in time for supper. The hotel is built after the plan of the Hotel Lafayette at Lake Minnetonka, though not completed outside or in. A large veranda adorns its front. The office is large, halls very wide, ceilings unusually high, rooms of good size and comfortable, though cheaply furnished, electric bills and lights, large dining room, 1 coat of plastering and 1 of paint throughout the house, courteous clerks, colored waiters, and the table, though by no means what it should be, lacking quality, not quantity, will doubtless be much improved the coming season. Rate $5 per day. When the hotel is completed and thoroughly organized, as time and the demands of the tourist will necessitate, no more inviting spot can possibly be found for those seeking health and pleasure. Having an altitude of 6,100 feet, the air is light and invigorating. The Gardner River, 1/4 of a mile distant, with its waters full of trout, will furnish sport for the fishermen, while invalids can be relieved of many of their ailments through the healing qualities of the innumerable varieties of hot baths which another season or two will complete. So far, only one, a sulfur bath, is in operation. To all, the hot springs and formations made by them will furnish a never-ceasing place of interest and pleasure. There is nothing in the park which surpasses them in beauty and novelty. Near the hotel stands Liberty Cap, 45 feet in height and 25 feet in diameter at its base, a cone-shaped extinct geyser. Another similar, though smaller, is called the Giant's Thumb. Here begins the ascent of the formation made by evaporation of calcareous substance, brought forth in solution and covering an area of 3 square miles. Of this, the more recent deposits, where the springs are now in activity, occupy 150 acres and are said to have a depth of 400 to 600 feet. Stepping from one terrace to another with great care, in order to avoid injuring any of the artistically arranged and beautifully fringed rims of the pools, proximity, not distance, lends enchantment. They are indescribably beautiful, the coloring of some of the basins being of the most vivid tints, cream-colored in the bottom, deepening to salmon, and then to brilliant red, yellow, or green on the edges. The terraces vary in width from 8 feet to several yards, and are covered with these basins semicircular in shape and adjoining each other. One of the most beautiful of the many springs is 40 by 25 feet in size, of perfect emerald color, boiling quietly, though the bottom can be distinctly seen. Another smaller one, called Cleopatra's Spring, is considered by many the gem of them all. Standing on a mound formation 40 feet high, with a basin oval-shaped, about 10 by 15 feet in size, shallow, pearly white bottom, shading toward the edge to pink and yellowish red, while the water itself is a light blue. As we reach the older portion of the formation, many extinct craters are found. From one of these craters, in a side hill, a poisonous gas escapes, the fatality of which may be surmised from the fact that surrounding it are dozens of dead birds and others with life nearly extinct. The rates for taking tourists through the park, which means the geyser basins, falls, and canyon, are established by the government at $25 per passenger. Time occupied, 6 days. The park stage company have an office in the hotel where good conveyances and trustworthy drivers or guides can be obtained. Arrangements, however, can be made with reliable private parties, some of whom have the best of conveyances and horses for making the tour at less expense, and to many in a more satisfactory manner, for the reason that they should desire to remain longer than the fixed time at some of the places of interest, they can do so, whereas with the stage company's conveyances, schedule time only is made during the entire trip. A 2-seated conveyance with 2 horses for 3 persons and driver can be had for $10 per day, while a 3-seated one with 4 horses for 5 persons and driver can be hired for $15 per day, with an additional expense of $2.50 per day for a saddle horse to be used for alternate relief, and it is a good investment. For gentlemen or ladies who are equestrians, this is decidedly the better way to do the park. Horses can be obtained at $2.50 per day each, and a guide with his horse at $5 per day. As little baggage as possible should be taken from the hotel, and that principally warm clothing. This is important as in July or August it is not unusual to have water freeze in the lodging places at night. Guidebooks state that tourists must be very cautious about drinking the water after leaving the Mammoth Hot Springs. This we found an unnecessary precaution, as many cool, clear springs were found under direction of our guide, from which we all drank freely with no unpleasant after-effects. After having passed one day at the Mammoth Hot Springs, the following morning at 8 o'clock, we bid adieu to communication with friends in the outside world for 6 days, and proceed on a journey to make Norris Geyser Basin 23 miles for dinner. The first 3 miles out is a continual ascent through woods up the mountainside, in some places rising at an angle of about 40 degrees, the roadway wide enough only for one team, with occasional widenings for a conveyance to lay by while another passes. At length the top is thankfully reached, a turn made, and we are at the head of a valley 1/2 mile in width and several miles long. Here in winter elk abound in great numbers. Passing through this valley, catching occasional glimpses of snow-capped mountains, nothing of interest is found until 17 miles out we come to one of the greatest curiosities in the park, if not in the world, called the Obsidian Cliffs, or Glass Mountain, 600 feet in height and 1,000 feet long, entirely composed of glass, black but translucent. Around the end, and cut out of this mountain, the road runs for 1/4 of a mile, being made entirely from glass, said to be the only one of its kind in the world. In making this road, large pieces of glass were made available by building a fire around them until a certain degree of heat was reached, when, by means of water thrown over them, they would fly into small pieces. Leaving here, we pass along the banks of Beaver Lake, so called from the variety of dams, some 40 in number, built by beavers years ago, still in a perfect state of preservation, each with a fall of from 6 inches to 2 feet. 6 miles farther on, Norris Geyser Basin is reached for dinner. Here we remain the afternoon and night. The hotel or station kept by the park company consists entirely of tents. Accommodations are but fair, but plenty of warm blankets are supplied, which are needed, as it is one of the coldest places in the park. Rates here, as at all other interior stations, are $4 per day. 1/2 mile from here brings us to the Geyser Basin, and no description or number of such which tourists may have read will give them any idea of the magnitude of these fire holes. Boiling springs innumerable, of every conceivable shape, are found in close proximity, steaming, fretting, or spouting, as may be their special vocation, and the obnoxious smell of sulfur is everywhere noticeable. To the left and near the road is a hole 6 inches in diameter, out of which steam is roaring like the blow-off of a locomotive. To the right, a little farther on, is the steamboat vent, where from a crevice 3 feet by 8 inches, steam is sent forth in great quantities with an awful roar, and recently it has commenced to throw out occasionally a few barrels of water. Above and to the left of this is the Emerald Pool, 20 feet in diameter, boiling quietly, so clear that points of beautifully colored rocks 50 feet below can be distinctly seen. Directly across the road is a pool about the same size, boiling, tumbling, and occasionally throwing sprays from 8 to 10 feet in height. This is called the mud geyser, from the color of the water thrown out, which resembles slacking lime. On a plateau below of 10 or more acres, several small but exceedingly active geysers are located, the most important being the Minuteman, which spouts at regular intervals of 1 minute the year round, throwing water 20 to 30 feet high from a 6-inch vent. Exploring the basin adjacent is attended with great danger, there being acres of it over which but a mere crust is spread. A few hundred yards beyond the great geyser of this basin is located one called the Monarch, which makes its display once in 24 hours, throwing an immense quantity of water from 3 craters, 80 to 100 feet in height, for 10 minutes. After a half-day's inspection of these wonders, which are seemingly under the direct supervision of His Satanic Majesty, those who can pass a peaceful night in sweet repose have ever lived an exemplary life, or are beyond redemption. The following morning we proceed a few miles, cross a large meadow called Elk Park, round a high bluff, and enter Gibbon River Canyon, which we follow 4 miles, winding beside the riverbank amid scenery particularly fascinating, the bluffs standing 2,000 feet above on either side, covered with pines. The canyon gradually narrows until we are obliged to use the river bottom to proceed for a short distance. This indicates the approach to the falls. By means of a narrow pass, an exit from the bottom of the canyon is made, when we follow the brink of it until the roar of the falls is below. Those not having plenty of physical endurance will not be apt to have the pleasure of a view of this interesting spot, which can only be obtained by going down the bluff by a trail, a distance of 1,000 feet, not losing hold of one small tree until another is grasped. A point is finally reached from which the Gibbon Falls may be seen, and one feels well repaid for the effort. Here the river narrows to 30 feet and leaps over in a foaming sheet, landing 84 feet below. Were they not located in the midst of so many wonders, they would be considered a special wonder in themselves. 5 miles farther on, Marshall's log cabin is reached for dinner, the most comfortable place to stop at in the park. For this reason, many tourists arrange to stay here 3 nights while out, passing the first afternoon in a tour to Lower Geyser Basin, 3 miles distance, where 2 or 3 important geysers are located, the principal of which are the Fountain and Crevice, one of recent appearance. Both make their displays once in 24 hours at about 6 p.m. The larger one, the Fountain, throws great quantities of water 70 feet high and lasts from 4 to 6 minutes. A few hundred feet to the east are located the Paint Pots, a most interesting spot to visit. Here is, boiling and sputtering, a mud cauldron 40 by 60 feet, half of which is divided into pools or pots of great varieties of color, each bubbling away with an individuality entirely its own, all partaking somewhat of the nature of boiling mush, but upon investigation resembling potter's clay. The marvelous coloring in each of these pots is the feature. Lying side by side in the most delicate tints are pink and red and blue, adjoining drab brown and pearly white. Small mud balls of the size of marbles are thrown from the center of these pools at intervals of 1/2 a minute. End of section 12. Section 13 of Gems of the Northwest by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain, read by Ted Lienhart. My Trip to the Yellowstone Park, Part 2. After passing a comfortable night at Marshall's, at 8 a.m. we start for Upper Geyser Basin, 10 miles, stopping halfway at Hell's Half Acre, very appropriately named, to see Excelsior Geyser, the largest in the world, having a crater 40 by 60 feet. Its eruption is now very uncertain, 12 months or more having elapsed since the last one. When it does spout, however, it throws immense quantities of water 300 to 400 feet in height for several hours, and raising Fire Hole River, a rapid stream 30 feet wide, 10 to 12 inches. During its rest, the water may be seen 20 feet below the surface, continually boiling and upheaving, and from it there are 2 streams running, 10 feet wide and 8 inches deep, which have a temperature of 190 degrees Fahrenheit. A few hundred feet to the west is located Prismatic Lake, a most beautiful boiling sheet of water 400 by 600 feet, which is so called from the great variety of colored rocks projecting from below its surface. A short distance to the north lies a boiling spring, 15 feet in diameter, of the most perfect turquoise blue. The quiet gentleness of its manner, in connection with its softness of color, makes it very attractive. 1/2 an hour passed here, and with a feeling of relief to be on terra firma again, we proceed a few miles, when, by the great number of hot springs, our approach to the great Fire Hole Basin is indicated. Passing 2 miles through it, by several geysers and hundreds of springs, we land at the quarters occupied by the park company as a hotel, similar, though much superior, to those at Norris. Surveying the surroundings, one feels overpowered by the magnitude of wonders in all directions. In this basin alone, there are no less than 26 active and important geysers, varying in frequency of eruption from once in 20 minutes to once in 14 days, with craters varying in size from 6 inches to 20 feet in diameter, and power sufficient to throw water from 10 to 300 feet in height. Standing at the south end of the basin, looking north, there is scarcely a moment in the day that some one geyser may not be seen spouting, and often 3 or 4 at the same time. By far the most interesting one, from his phenomenal regularity, is Old Faithful, whose display is made once in about 65 minutes the year round. To this old fellow all turn their attention first, being but a short distance from and in full view of the quarters. During the interval of quietude, the crater, 3 by 4 feet, which rises some 3 feet above the surrounding formation, can be approached. Looking into it, boiling water can be seen in great activity at a depth of 6 feet. As the time draws near for his display, the turmoil within increases, giving timely warning to stand aside. A small spray is thrown up a few feet and falls back again. In a few moments, this is repeated. The third attempt proves successful, and gradually rising higher and higher until a height of from 150 to 220 feet is reached. An immense volume of water is thrown for from 5 to 7 minutes, completely flooding the surrounding surface. Then, slowly lowering to regions below, another 65 minutes rest is taken when the display is repeated, affording a never-failing source of delight to all who witness it. Across the river, 1/4 of a mile distant, is the Giantess, the largest in the basin, having a crater 18 by 20 feet, erupting once in from 14 to 18 days, and continuing from 12 to 36 hours, throwing water 250 feet high. During its action, the trembling of the surrounding formation is distinctly discernible for nearly half a mile distant, and the rumbling sound, resembling distant thunder, can be heard at a much greater distance, while the rising steam may be seen many miles. This one often throws out rocks weighing several hundred pounds. A few hours after the Giantess has commenced, the Beehive, located a short distance toward the river, begins to show signs of turmoil in its crater, which rises 3 feet above the surrounding surface and in shape resembles a large hornet's nest. This, by many, is considered the most beautiful geyser in any of the basins, throwing a very compact stream 150 feet high and continuing 6 minutes. Nearby are the Lion and Lioness, spouting once in 3 hours to a height of 75 feet, and 2 cubs adjoining, making their display every hour. 1/4 of a mile north is the Grand, a most powerful geyser, throwing a stream of water 6 feet in diameter to a height of from 200 to 300 feet, continuing from 1 to 3 hours. Nearby is the Sawmill, a vicious little fellow, having his periodical blowout once in 2 hours. The Comet is also close by, which goes once in 3 hours, throwing a stream at an angle of 70 degrees 120 feet high. Across the river is the Castle, so named from its peculiar crater, which stands 20 feet above the surrounding formation. This is in continual agitation, but has its grand display once in 48 hours. Below stand the Giant, Grotto, Splendid, and many others, each having peculiarities in its formation, time of action, and power. Aside from the geysers, there are hundreds of boiling springs, some of great beauty, well worth visiting. Most tourists, however, do not remain here as long as they feel they would like to, but reluctantly leave the same afternoon to return to Marshall's for the night, and the next morning start for the falls and canyon, 30 miles distant east, hoping to reach there by 1 p.m. The first few miles out is along and in view of the east fork of Fire Hole River, and at 10 miles we cross the divide, and in the valley beyond pass many sulfur springs and visit Crater Hills, sometimes called Sulphur Mountains, a group of detached hills standing 150 feet high, composed of calcareous substance largely impregnated with sulfur. Some portions are indeed nearly pure sulfur. Some large sulfur springs in continual upheaval are also located here. Farther on is a basin of a few acres containing a great number of mud springs of different sizes, one of which is 15 feet or more in diameter. Leaving this point, nothing of great interest is found until the Yellowstone River is reached, where it enters the Grand Canyon, through which it forces its way for 20 miles. The upper falls may be distinctly heard at a great distance. The cliffs are here from 200 to 300 feet in height, and the distance from bank to bank at the falls is only 80 feet. The water shoots out some distance from the brink, then drops in an unbroken volume 112 feet into the basin below. These are by some considered more beautiful than the lower falls, which are much larger. Between the upper and lower falls, the distance is only half a mile. And midway are the Crystal Cascades in Cascade Creek, 3 in number, giving a total fall of 129 feet. The Great Falls immediately below present one of the most awe-inspiring views in this wonderful country. The river, having forced its way to the brink, where it is 84 feet wide and 4 feet deep in low water, makes one grand plunge 362 feet into the abyss below. The scene from above, where a platform has been arranged with staunch railing, is indescribably grand. 1 mile below, traversed only by a trail, Point Lookout is reached. From this bluff, a scene of beauty, surpassing all imagination or expectation, is presented. From the upper falls, for a distance of from 7 to 9 miles below, the walls or cliffs of the canyon present an endless variety of the most vivid colored rocks, red and yellow predominating, often blending with other colors, rendering them marvelously beautiful. Riding along the brink of the canyon, changing views are presented which will never be forgotten, the walls in some places being vertical, while in others they slope gradually, and the river below resembles a white ribbon. The hotel accommodations here are like those at Norris and the Upper Basin, and possibly as good as could be expected. An improvement in all of them will be a source of great gratification to all tourists, however, and cannot be long delayed. Remaining here from 1 p.m. the 4th day out until noon of the 5th, we turn our faces toward Marshall's once more, and reach there for supper, remain the night, and with an early start the next morning, reach Mammoth Hot Springs, 45 miles, at 5 p.m. A grand rush is made for letters and news from home, a quiet evening passed in rest, and on the following morning stages are taken for Cinnabar, where we bid adieu to this charming locality, earnestly hoping we may again have the pleasure of visiting it. It is indeed a region of wonder, terror, and delight, and no American citizen should fail to see it. A. M. Ingersoll. End of section 13. Section 14 of Gems of the Northwest by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ted Lienhart. The Apostle Islands and Lake Superior. Our purpose in this chapter is to convey some idea of the hitherto neglected and little-known attractions of Lake Superior and of the luxurious accommodations provided for the tourist by the railway company at Ashland. The Wisconsin Central Railroad, in connection with the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway, is not only the most direct route to the northern country, but it leads to the only place on the Great Lake where really first-class accommodations are offered. The railroad ride is a very pleasant feature in itself, passing, as it does, through the varied features of cultivated farmlands and the dense forest, threading itself now through the finished landscape and anon through a rocky gorge or over an iron bridge thrown across a mountain torrent. The ease-loving passenger can start either from Chicago or Milwaukee on sleeping cars unrivaled for elegance and be carried without change to the very border of the Great Lake. Cedar Lake is 33 miles from Milwaukee and the heart of the German settlements. The railroad passes very near, but yet not quite in sight of the lake. It is an exquisite body of water, frequented somewhat by camping parties from its proximity to the city. It can be readily reached by an hour's ride on the Wisconsin Central train, which leaves Milwaukee in the early morning, so that one can arrive on the ground by 8 o'clock, fish and picnic all day, and return to the city the same evening. Fond du Lac and Oshkosh are next en route. Both are business towns of importance, and in each place, as at Neenah, 12 miles farther on, The railroad company has erected depots of considerable architectural pretensions, which are favorably located both for freight and passenger traffic. Commercial men find them exceedingly convenient and attractive. North of Fond du Lac, the road skirts along Lake Winnebago, an interesting body of water as well from a practical as from a sentimental point of view. By a glance at the map, it will be seen that the lake looks as if it might have been in past ages a part of Green Bay. It is 65 miles long by 18 wide and forms the means of water communication with the settlements on its banks. Indian towns have frequently anticipated thriving commercial centers, and the cities of Fond du Lac, Oshkosh, Neenah, and Menasha, all situated on Lake Winnebago, offer a striking illustration of the rule. The general government, in connection with what is known as the Fox River Improvement Company, built expensive dams at Neenah and Menasha, the lake forming a waterhead of unfailing capacity. The river here has a fall of full 15 feet. Hence, these places are furnished with power to carry on extensive manufactures in hubs, spokes, woodenware, flour, and paper. Among the 1,000 lakes for which Wisconsin is justly famous, Winnebago is the largest and most attractive. The fishing in the lake is unusually fine, black bass of great size abounding in unlimited numbers. It is seldom in America that one finds a summer hotel situated in such spacious grounds, and there are few places anywhere so complete in all respects as Roberts, with its pleasant view through the trees, its charming panorama of the lake, its shady groves, and the old house, an adjunct of the larger hotel, with its vine-clad porch and gables, a venerable antiquity, built and occupied in pioneer days by James Duane Doty, the first territorial governor of Wisconsin. In his time, it was the scene of many a hospitable entertainment, sometimes of courtly guests, and again of Indian chiefs. The loggery contains 16 rooms and is often preferred to the hotel on account of its romantic associations. In full view is the famous Treaty Elm, beneath whose wide-spreading branches was concluded many an important treaty with the tribes, formerly sole occupants of the country. At Waupaca, the traveler is 130 miles from Milwaukee and 215 miles from Chicago, still on the main line of the Wisconsin Central Railroad. He has reached what was but a few years ago known as the Indian Country. Now the farmer has usurped the Indian's place, and the country is fast being reclaimed from a state of nature. A river, navigable for canoes and rowboats, flows directly through the town, and its intervale has a never-wearying charm. There are several hills of moderate height about the town, from which can be seen, so long as the season lasts, tints as tender, hues as vivid or modest, reflections as cunningly caught in the surrounding lakes as can be found anywhere. 2 lakes with high banks crowned with pleasant groves lie at the foot of the main street. The attractive feature of the locality is the chain of lakes, 2½ miles from the town. Linked together by deep, clear channels are 8 lakes, which present a scene of enchanting loveliness. The waters are cold and remarkably clear. Fish swarm as plentifully as they did before the shores felt the impress of the white man's foot. The greatest charm of the place lies in these views and the choice facilities for boating. There are 100 boats on the chain at the service of the tourist. A trip through the lakes or down the sweeping current of Waupaca River will afford many a dissolving view, singularly rich in fascinating beauty. In Greenwood Park, on the chain, is a good hotel, with accommodations for 150 guests. At Waupaca, trains stop for meals. Here, as at Abbotsford, the railroad company owns the eating house, which fact is a guarantee of excellent meals. Beyond Stevens Point, where the road crosses the Wisconsin River, the line extends for 200 miles through a vast forest. The train passes on as if entering a tunnel, and throughout the balance of the journey, the sound of the locomotive whistle strikes the clear air, dying in long, lingering echoes. Occasionally, there are dashes through exquisite groves of soft balsam firs with perfectly tapering, cone-like forms. Lumber mills are thickly scattered all along the route. their booms of brown logs glistening in the brimming rivers. It is not, however, until the tourist arrives at the Pinocchio Gap, away up in the north, where the line runs over ragged cliffs and through deep defiles, where the streams dash angrily along over rocky precipices and through narrow gorges around the hills, that the superior country is reached. Emerging from the majesty of the shadowy height, the train crosses Bad River 17 times in 9 miles and sweeps from curve to curve, swiftly, ever more swiftly, past Rapid and Fall, over the famous iron bridge, down to Ashland on the lake. The first impression of the great Chequamegon at Ashland is one of unfeigned surprise. The traveler has reached the northern border of a vast forest, the largest east of the Rocky Mountains, which until a few years ago was impassable, and here, by the grace of modern engineering skill, he finds himself in a magnificent hotel, set up in the heart of the primeval wilderness, and that, too, but a few hours distant from Milwaukee or Chicago. The contrast is greater because of the suddenness of the vision. The train arrives about 7 in the evening, and soon the hotel is aflame with its 1,000 lights. The ear is greeted by strains of music and the gentle hum of contented voices from the spacious parlors. Here we find quiet and peace, soft carpets and elaborate furnishings. Here gas, water, electric bells, 1,000 feet of veranda, fountains, fire escapes from every room in case of dread calamity, and solicitous but unobtrusive attendants, all within a distance of a mile from clusters of Indian lodges with their flickering campfires. The grand parlor of this famous hotel is the finest room of the kind in the West. It is very large, with deep windows hung with rich, heavy curtains and carpeted with Wilton, noiseless to the tread. Those who have visited the White Mountains will remember the old-fashioned fireplace at the Glen House. Here the same thing has been reproduced on a grander scale, and is a feature of the Chequamegon. Ashland is so far north that it is cool even in July, and the fire made with cordwood sends forth its hospitable blaze to welcome the traveler on the arrival of each train. Thus far, the tourist has only taken a general survey of the situation and caught something of the spirit of the scenes about him. The effect will be considerably enhanced as he goes abroad through the surrounding country. This, in brief, is a home for the summer. Those who row up the beautiful streams and drop hook in the limpid waters, who stream out among the islands, where every turn of the wheel opens a new and enchanting view, who wander among the caves formed in the sandstone by the surf of Gitche Gumee, who sit on the broad piazza of the Chequamegon and view the most gorgeous sunsets across a bay rivaling that of Naples, who dip their cups in the pure waters of the spring and open their chests to breathe an air balmy as that of Eden, will bless the happy chance that brought them to nature's choicest blessing. End of section 14. End of Gems of the Northwest, a brief description of prominent places of interest along the lines of the Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway and connecting roads by Chicago, Milwaukee, and St. Paul Railway Company.